So there's a chord in total harmony that's a total imposter. This chord is such a sneaky one that it can drive you nuts when you're trying to find the key of a song that it's used in. Not only that, but this chord poses as a function from the dominant region, when in fact, it's a subdominant. Or is it? If you're new to MDEX Music, we create music books and apps, piano arrangements, and we discuss improvisation, songwriting, and sometimes we take music theory to strange and uncharted places. So subscribe and hit the bell, and join us for exclusive access to our ever-expanding library of music resources. Take a listen to Sweet Home Alabama. So if I look at these three chords from the perspective of the key of G, all I'm really doing is 5, 4, 1, except we're not in the key of G at all. If we did see Sweet Home Alabama from the perspective of the key of G and we looked at the chord progression on our map, we would see that it goes backwards, counterclockwise, around the circle of fifths. But we showed that in tonal harmony, progressions usually want to go clockwise around the map, subdominant to tonic. But also in our last video on the plagal cadence, we showed how in blues and in gospel, the plagal cadence allows us to write progressions that do move counterclockwise. So a 5-4-1 can also be a perfectly well-formed progression. But listen to this, listen to it again. If I play D, C, G, and then return back to D, our 5 chord, it sounds perfectly resolved, doesn't it? How is it possible that the D, a 5 chord, sounds like a target? It sounds like a home chord. This is because traveling counterclockwise around the map is much weaker. As we mentioned in our last video, the plagal cadence needs context. The tonic has to be clearly established before we can even talk about plagal cadence. But in this progression, there's never a 5-1. There's never a D to G. On top of that, the melody never targets G. It actually targets the D note. And the licks and lines are based on the D major pentatonic. So like, listen to the melody of the chorus. It resolves on that D right there. Everything points to that we're in the key of D. Okay, so maybe we should change our perspective and look at this song as if we're in the key of D. Now the D is the 1, the G is the 4, and the C is not in the key. There's a C sharp in the key of D major, but not a C. So if we want to see this progression as being in the key of D, we have to interpret the C chord as a borrowed chord from some other mode, a modal interchange chord. Now I know what you're probably thinking right now. You're crazy. Why would you complicate something so much? When we're in the key of G, all these chords were available to us as diatonic chords. C was just the 4, G was the 1, and D was the 5. Just a 1, 4, 5. Simple. And now you're trying to explain this progression using a much more complicated point of view. Why does any of this even matter? Let me give you 2 answers. First, the simplest explanation is not always the right one. And secondly, looking at a chord progression from different perspectives might give us a better insight of what tonality is all about. What is the tonic? And what is the subdominant? Or what is the dominant? And more importantly, how can we use these perspectives to find better chords and progressions for our songs? Again, let's assume we're in the key of D major. D is the 1, G is the 4, and C is a modal interchange chord. Look at the map. Right there in the dominant region, there's a C chord from the minor mode. In D minor, for example, the 7th degree is a flat 7, and the chord on that flat 7 is a C major triad. So now the D-C progression is a 1, flat 7, 4. We're still moving counterclockwise around the map, and as we said before, this is a very valid way of traveling the map. It's still a weak progression to establish D as the key, but once we introduce the melody, targeting the note D, we can clearly hear D as the tonic, even when we end on a long G chord, the 4, as Sweet Home Alabama does. It should be clear by now that moving counterclockwise around the circle sounds good, but it doesn't help much in establishing the key. More context is needed in order to do so. In these types of progressions, the melody is essential if we want to figure out what's really going on harmonically. So take this next example on top of the same exact chords in the same exact key. We're just gonna change the melody a little bit. So now I have something that's more in the key of G, right? And it ends and targets G. So on top of this progression, it makes G sound like a resolution point, a home. Take a listen to this next example by the Marshall Tucker Band. Can't you see? Oh, can't you see what that woman's been doing to me? This is a great illustration of how important this context that we're talking about is. It's the same exact key, using the same exact progressions, and now all signs point to D as our home. The melody, the flute line, how the progression starts and ends, the guitar solos, the constant like D sus resolution. Every element of this song points to us being in the key of D. Everything except, well, at first glance anyways, the chord progression. That is, until you adopt the perspective of the C being the flat 7 of the key and not the 4. What's interesting is that whether you see these two songs as either a 1 flat 7 4 or a 5 4 1, we still get that counterclockwise movement around the map. But what's really interesting is that this C chord appearing at first glance as a 4 chord while actually being a flat 7 is not at all what makes it an impostor chord. To understand what really makes the flat 7 an impostor chord, we'll have to dive much deeper.